You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So Kyle McCord is actually pretty good. Here is some background on Kyle McCord. He is a four-star transfer quarterback from Ohio State, okay? A big-time program at Ohio State. And all he did with the Buckeyes last season as the full-time starter is go 11-1 with nearly 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and have a top 10 quarterback rating in the country. That's all he did. That's all he did. Obviously, horrific numbers at Ohio State. Clearly, it was always about Marvin Harrison and the weapons. Kyle McCord deserves no credit for actually being good. That's what that's what pundits would like you to think. But in reality, we now have a 14-game sample of Kyle McCord, and he is actually really freaking good. His box score numbers this season so far through 2 games, 735 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 69% completion rate. He has been ridiculous to start this season. I predicted heading into the year that he was going to be second team All-ACC, just behind Cam Ward at Miami. And guess what? He might even be first team All-ACC. All right. Fine, maybe I'm just getting a little ahead of myself. I have to give Cam Ward props for what he's doing at Miami. He's killing it over there too. But hey, my prediction of Kyle McCord, second team All-ACC, doesn't look so bad now, does it? Looks pretty darn good, right? And already in the Heisman conversation, I didn't see that coming. That is absolutely ridiculous. But I knew he was going to be good for this team. And I'm glad that the college football world is starting to take notice that Kyle McCord is actually a pretty darn good quarterback. And here's the thing. We now have 14 games on Kyle McCord. Here are his numbers, 14 games, all playing for a Power 4 or Power 5 team, because last year was the Power 5. Ready? Here are his numbers in 14 starts in 2 years. 3,900 passing yards, 32 passing touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, and a near 67% rate completion. So his numbers are really good through 14 games, and his record is 13-1. His only loss was on the road to the national champion. That was it. Last year, Kyle McCord lost to Michigan on the road in a tight game. That is it with Kyle McCord. So he is really, really good. Okay? We have learned that now through 2 weeks, and hopefully everyone else has learned that across the country. He makes the simple throws look simple. That's how he got on track versus Ohio after a first drive, which, well, didn't really go so well. It was 3 and out with nearly 2 interceptions on the drive. But he got on track with those simple throws that I talked about when I recapped that game, Syracuse and Ohio. You can check it out after this podcast. And he also can make the special throws. We saw a number of them against Ohio and Georgia Tech. He's also clutch. Think about that 3rd and 10 conversion to Oronde Gadsden at the end of the game against Georgia Tech. If they don't convert that 3rd and 10, the Yellow Jackets actually get the ball back with multiple timeouts and a chance to go win the game and completely rip our hearts out, because Syracuse would have blown a 17-point lead in the 4th quarter. But Kyle McCord is clutch. So is Oronde Gadsden. We don't have to worry about that. Syracuse beat Georgia Tech 31-28 on Saturday. So we're not even going to remember that Georgia Tech really had a chance to win at the end. Okay. As a friend of mine texted me this yesterday morning. Okay. Got to shout out my friend here. You don't become the starting quarterback at Ohio State by accident. You don't. You have to be really freaking good. And he transferred over to Syracuse, and people thought he's not very good. Not saying Syracuse fans, but a lot. They were wrong. It's okay to be wrong. I mean, I've been wrong too. I mean, Thomas Castellanos at Boston College looks really good. I didn't think he was that good, but he looks great so far through 2 games, and Boston College is a ranked team. Tyler Shuck at Louisville looks like the real deal. I didn't believe in him going into the year. So it's okay to be wrong. But people were wrong on Kyle McCord. Myself, not really one of them. I thought he was going to be good this entire time. And really what created this perception about Kyle McCord, and it was really, it's the perfect storm of why people thought, this guy's not really the guy. Perfect storm happened last year at Ohio State. First of all, I've talked about this almost ad nauseum. The 3 starting quarterbacks prior to Kyle McCord were all first-round picks. All right, you got CJ Stroud, who was actually the number 2 overall pick in the draft. And in case you missed it, he's looking really good with the Texans in the NFL. Justin Fields was a first-round pick. And Dwayne Haskins, a first-round pick. And by the way, all 3 of them were in the Heisman Trophy conversation while they were playing at Ohio State. So Kyle McCord had a really good year. He just wasn't on that level of a first-round NFL quarterback. Guess what? How many first-round quarterbacks are there per year? 3, 4, maybe 5? That's it. There's not a lot of them. Kyle McCord, once again, had a top 10 QBR in the country last year. He was really good. He just wasn't on the level of a first-round pick. That's okay. I understand. It's Ohio State, but still. You can do a whole lot worse than Kyle McCord. And I think they're learning that this year with Will Howard, who I'm not going to sit here and say Will Howard's a scrub or anything. Will Howard's really good. It's hard to find first-round quarterbacks, even for a program like Ohio State. All right? So he had that going against him, that warped perception. He also lost to Michigan, which is unacceptable at Ohio State. It's also unacceptable at Michigan to lose to the other school. You can't lose to that school. I think those fan bases would take a 1-11 season if that one win was against the other one. Seriously. It's almost more important to them to win that game than it is to win the national championship. Kyle McCord lost to Michigan, the team that went on to win the national title, and he lost that game on the road, and he didn't really even play that poorly. But they lost. All right? And by the way, CJ Stroud lost to Michigan twice. And this is finally the third reason why there was a warped perception of Kyle McCord. Ohio State did not make the college football playoff last year in a completely unprecedented year in the college football playoff era. I don't think people understand how crazy it was last season because there were 7 teams with a legitimate case to be in the college football playoff for only 4 spots. That has never happened before. And it won't ever happen again because now we have a 12-team playoff. But last year, 4 teams, obviously, that got in, certainly had cases to be in the college football playoff. They got in, ultimately. Florida State was the first undefeated Power 5 conference champion to be left out of the college football playoff. They didn't get in. Georgia was the number 1 team in the country up until the final week where they lost to Alabama in the SEC title game. They were left out. And Ohio State was 11-1. 11-1, and their only loss was to the team that was the number 1 overall seed. And it was a close game on the road. And they were left out too. So there were 7 teams. But Kyle McCord technically didn't lead Ohio State to the playoff, which for them is unacceptable because the standard there is to win the national title. If you don't make the playoff, that's what happens. So I do feel like Kyle McCord had the perfect storm of almost everything going against him that created this perception that he just wasn't a very good quarterback. Because I gave you the numbers through 14 games. You guys, I gave you guys the numbers he has through 2 weeks with Syracuse. And he's actually really good. It's just, yeah, I know he had weapons at Ohio State. I get it. But almost everything went against him in the regard of he wasn't like his predecessors. He lost to Michigan. And he didn't make the team didn't make the college football playoff in a completely unprecedented year. In fact, the same thing happened to CJ Stroud in 2022, where the team went 11-1. Their only loss was to Michigan. And by the way, that loss was at home to Michigan. They got embarrassed in that game, and they still made the college football playoff because normally there aren't a lot of teams with a case to make it. But for last season, there were 7 that had a legitimate argument. So everything essentially went against Kyle McCord. He is really good. Is he going to continue to sustain this level of play? Hopefully, right? Hopefully, that's the goal. I mean, Syracuse hasn't had someone, I looked it up this morning, Syracuse hasn't had someone finish top 3 in Heisman voting since Don McPherson in 1987. Let that sink in. Even Donovan McNabb, I looked it up, his highest Heisman finish was number 5. All I'm saying is that if Kyle McCord keeps this level of play up, he's certainly going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation if he's not already in it. Okay, so what have we learned through 2 weeks? Kyle McCord is actually good at football. I think we can all put the narrative to bed that he wasn't. Okay, we can put it to bed. Goodbye. Never have to see it again. Let's enjoy the ride because Kyle McCord is really freaking good.